Hi, I'm Christina Giacona.
And I'm Patrick Conlon.
And we are the composers and the producers of The Cube of Light.
The Cube of Light is a 41-minute visual album. It's 9 tracks that are paired together with 7 music videos. And those music videos were each choreographed by a set of different choreographers and danced by different dancers, and then filmed by Josh Bivens.
I was a wave of light, left on a darkened shore, but now forevermore.
So really the idea behind this piece was we wanted to be experienced in several different forms. So the original presentation was in an art gallery. Next it's going to be released on album and then video for the visual aspect. But then we're also writing all of the orchestral parts to be played live. And so we're hoping that this piece will be played by symphony orchestras as well. Originally the seed, the impetus behind the music was going to be 15 minutes recorded music in an art gallery space. And so really it was just going to be Patrick and I either playing our own instruments or manipulating our own instruments and working with synthesizers. Through this process, we actually hired a 11-piece orchestra, a 5-piece brass ensemble, a few woodwinds, singers,
Guitarist, the drummer, bass player. I think Dustin might have been the first one that we worked with, our drummer. And so we sent him the tracks, and I remember the third movement we were even thinking about cutting, because it was just like big and synthy and goopy, and we liked it, but it was 6 minutes of goopy synthesizer. And then he just brought in this beat halfway through the song, and we were like, that's the song. Wanted it to be a long enough amount of music that whoever came into the exhibit would have a certain experience, but that every 4 to 5 minutes the feel would really change, so that different people coming in, checking it out, and leaving really quick wouldn't see the whole thing. It would be slightly a different feel each time they came in. Or if they sat through the whole thing, they would get to kind of experience that full arc.
When we started off this project, we never envisioned that it would be paired with dance.
No.
At all. And so we actually wrote music for music's sake. We thought it sounded good. We wanted to do this because it was unusual. We were wanting music that wasn't pop. We wanted music that expanded the listener's palette. So a lot of the pieces, we essentially had to reconstruct a click because it did not stay the same tempo.
Yeah, the impetus for the piece would be this Prophet 2-minute build that I had no idea how to recreate anymore because I'd done it 3 months earlier. That did not sit to a click, and so we had to figure out a way to have orchestral musicians play with it and orchestrate around the synthesizer. And so we got to have some very interesting little nitpicky things to do in Pro Tools, but it was an adventure for sure.
Patrick now says he learned from the experience and it's good and he's going to use it on other things. But the very first movement of the piece, there's this giant build and is actually one of the few times it actually stayed to a click, and I didn't like it. We'd already recorded everything and I wanted it to slightly slow down and then arrive. So, of course, I'm like, no, my artistic vision will be ruined if Patrick does not find a way to slow down the audio. So of course we had these grand visions of all these people being crammed into this space, essentially lying on the floor and listening or pressing their ear against the floor in order to hear or feel bass vibrations compared to sitting in a chair, that kind of thing. We got word of COVID and we didn't really think much of it when we were composing. We had no idea this would potentially change the direction of how people experience this art exhibit. So we were working on a couple other projects and we kind of pushed this one off to the side. And right when that happened, we were like, we have 1 week to record. Everything was shut down.
I'm in a big white house in an open field far away. And you're the big bad wolf living in the woods coming for me.
So essentially what we had to do was we had to create something that was viewable online, or the experience could be still achieved, but through a different means. So maybe less people in the space, music that was shorter or longer. We weren't really sure actually at this time what was going on.
When everything shut down, I remember we did a couple of puzzles, we read a couple of books, we did the whole thing that everyone was doing, and then we just started working on this project and kind of giving it time that it wasn't going to get otherwise. We had the time to get stuck somewhere and then just kind of ask the piece, what do you need? And then it would be like, I think I need bass. And we'd try one track with bass, and that's like, okay, 6 of you need bass. And so that changed the direction of where we went with some of the songs. A lot of the things that originally were going to be more just purely atmospheric, we started to do things like adding drums and bass and guitar, and these things to give them a little bit more of a song structure. Usually when you're doing postal service style writing, which is that like you're emailing someone an MP3 or the tracks and then they put something on it and send it back, it's usually because of distance reasons. But we were actually working with all of our friends in Oklahoma City, sending them the tracks, and then they would send it back to us. So we got people who we knew had their own home studios, so they would be able to track themselves. And so Dustin and Mitch are both great audio engineers as well. And so we were able to send them our ideas, kind of describe the things specifically that we wanted, and then get them back from them. And so it created this kind of 6-month email chain of musical ideas, and then whenever we'd get something back from someone, it would spring us forward for the next musical idea.
My name is Maggie Boyette, and I'm a dancer and choreographer here in Oklahoma City. I also work as an arts administrator. I choreographed the video for the piece, The Dreams We Had.
And we found our home in stars shining bright, because the dreams we had were of a cube of light.
So there's like this idea that's kind of pan-Indian, American Indian, of like having to walk in two worlds or walking two separate paths. And so a lot of the dancing that I'm doing, even though I'm a classically trained ballet and contemporary American dancer, I also grew up doing powwow dancing, and I dance with our Shawnee people doing ceremonial functions as well, which are two very different types of like environments to be dancing in. I'm working with that concept a lot in the art that I create. So you can kind of see that in the Dreams We Had piece with my mom, grandmother, and I in our native regalia, doing just traditional powwow steps, and then doing a contemporary improvised solo in a different costume, in a different setting. I had been wanting to make a dance for and with my family. The other part of that is because of the pandemic this year, we really missed powwows, and we had to cancel the in-person parts of our ceremonial functions. That's just really hard on us and as a family, and as just like I think everybody that's Native American on the continent is feeling that this year. When I was thinking about the concept of light and kind of newness, and then also the lyrics in the song,
Found our home.
I was just like, oh, home. Okay, that's my mom and my grandmother. I could hear and see a really slow Southern traditional cloth or buckskin step to the rhythm of the music. We interspersed that with shots of me dancing in the more contemporary style, in a really neutral shift dress, barefoot, no frills, no anything else, just kind of like stripped down to the rawness. And a lot of that was improv, almost all of it was improv. It's really special to have my mom and my grandmother, and I'm so grateful to have like an artifact and like a family heirloom now that we'll have.
We were really lucky to have so many collaborators on this project, and one of the things that was so instrumental to get everyone to buy into it was the first choreographer we went to, Hicha Puz, who's the executive director of Race Dance Collective. She was all in. So she found us our first 2 choreographers, she choreographed one of the pieces, and she also got UCO's dance department in on it. And there's something where if you go to someone and say, hey, I've got this crazy project, do you want to be part of it? They're a lot more likely to say no than if someone like who's a really incredible ambassador for dance and music and art in Oklahoma City, goes to them and says, hey, I'm working on a really crazy project with this guy. Do you want to be part of it? And so that was a huge thing that allowed us to make this happen.
Look at the dark sky. Our light forms a narrow band. The path is lit. Will you take it?
We're extremely grateful to have this opportunity because this came at a time when we were trying to figure out what next season looked like, and we didn't know. And so when Patrick and Christina approached us, we thought, hey, this is something we could use for the students to have a goal, for us to have something to present, but also for Race and UCO to be able to work together, and also the two companies within UCO. So it was strangely something that came together in this perfect puzzle that none of us really had to work extremely hard for, except for the music part of it. And I think once that happened and we saw that it could align, it just kind of did. I mean, we didn't have a lot of major hurdles. The music was there for the dancers. The dancers and Josh worked incredibly well together. He was divine in the way that he saw, and whatever I didn't foresee, he could fill those gaps in, and he could give the ideas for all of the choreographers to say, hey, what do you think about this? How do you think this would look? And he just was really open to the collaboration. And I think if I had to use one word to describe this project, it would be collaboration. So for the KD2 piece this year, I played with a theory by James Marcia, who is a psychologist. And he had a theory called theory of identity achievement, which is typically more adolescence. But in this situation, I felt like it was a really great time to introduce it to the dancers because they're kind of, 19, 20, on the cusp of understanding who they are better. So I posed this idea of the 4 identities, and I chose 4 locations. I started them at the Labyrinth, and the first stage is diffusion. And without getting into too much detail, they kind of learned why they were there and how they got to the next step. So then we were in the Black Box Theater with Foreclosure, we were in the White Studio with Moratorium, and then finally outdoors at the lake with Achievement. So I had them structure a lot of the creativity themselves. So what I would do is say, hey, where is this stage and what does it mean to you? And how do we take that and translate that into movement? And so a lot of the movement, besides the 2 big pieces that I did, a lot of the movement in the smaller groupings and the solos and all of the improv things were all them. So it gave them an opportunity to use their creativity to achieve like an internal aha, awakening of your own power. Once you realize you have the power to control what you decide to believe in, that epiphany is awakened, and then you decide to empower yourself to do that on everything that's important. So to me, the light was something that I wanted them to find within, that we all should find within, because otherwise, who are we and why do we do what we do?